Welcome to the What I Wish I Knew After Pregnancy Loss podcast. I am your host, Sharna Southan. I am an angel mum, a rainbow mum, a pregnancy loss practitioner, and trauma-informed coach. I created the Institute of Healing Through Pregnancy Loss out of my own experience with loss in the hopes to provide understanding and healing, educating people on pregnancy loss, and creating more women or men in trained support roles. In this podcast, I hope to shed light on what I wish I knew in relation to pregnancy loss, opening up the conversation, breaking the stigma, and bringing real-life stories plus guest experts. Thank you for being here with me today, and let's dive into today's episode. Welcome, beautiful souls, to the What I Wish I Knew After Pregnancy Loss podcast. Today, I have with me the beautiful Carmen Grover. Carmen is a mum of 3 beautiful earthside babies, 7 heavenly babies. She is a nurse, a farmer, a yogi, and a writer. She has written a book, Journeying Through Pregnancy Loss. Welcome, Carmen, to the show.
Oh, how lovely, Sharna. That is my description right there. You don't need to say any more.
We'll just leave the podcast there.
Perfect. Yeah, that was perfect. Yeah, so good to be here.
Yeah, welcome. It's so lovely to have you. And yeah, on the other side of the world. So if there is some technical difficulties, it's because we're completely 2 different places.
It's all the beaches in the way.
Yeah, Carmen, did you want to obviously, share a little bit about your experience and kind of, I guess, what spurred you to maybe create the book that you ended up delivering to the world?
Absolutely. So my book, I like to say, kind of happened by accident. I didn't go in thinking I'm going to write a book on pregnancy loss. And it's kind of where we all end up, right? It's only because we go through our experiences that it leads us to where we are. But how it started was it was just my way of processing our losses from day one. So our first miscarriage, when we were sent home to, pass the baby, it just took over me. I went to my laptop and started typing whatever would come, kind of like a string of consciousness. And my husband came over, handed me a Kleenex box. And it's crazy to me to, this dinosaur laptop that I wrote on then would be the laptop that I wrote this book on. But I didn't know it then. So I was just writing it kind of to release and almost like an honor to our first loss and just everything I wanted to say to her. And it was almost like as much as I was bawling, it felt so beautiful too. And that's always the thing. It's hard to explain, right? Until you've kind of been there. So I always say it's beautifyingly horrible, kind of. So that was our first loss. And then our second loss, and it's funny how it shifts, but I actually kind of just wrote some bullet points on a napkin as we were traveling because I think the thoughts are still there, but I was a little more disconnected and we can talk more about like just even pregnancy after loss, right? And what that does. And you try to protect yourself a little more. So it kind of showed that in just the way that I did it for my second, but still writing, still needing to process, still acknowledging that this baby was here and mattered. And I needed to honor that even on a napkin, And then our third babe so I'm kind of giving you a history of our journey. So her name was Kaya Bell, and she was born at 24 weeks. And we had finally kind of made it past the 12-week scare that I hate to even mention that, but it's a real thing. And we actually, with her, got a terminal diagnosis. So we did have to decide to make that unimaginable decision. And with her especially, and again, whatever came over me, I almost made like a shrine book for her. And it just, every single thing, like from day one, we ate ice cream together. We played mini putt. And every person she met along the way. And it was so detailed and just felt so necessary. Again, not knowing why I needed to do that. And then with our son, Case, who came again, pregnancy after loss, I hardly wrote anything. And it just shows you like, I was so grateful that but I was almost in denial. And again, it was like that protective, like I knew I was pregnant, but I didn't take the pictures like I did with her because I was just fearful that these pictures would end up in another dead baby book. So it was my counselor who kind of said, Carmen, you never lose those pictures and you can always go back and look. And that's kind of what you're grateful for having with Kaya. So it was kind of like, I want to say around 30 weeks that I started like, okay, like, hey baby, like, and even though I'll be walking and you're talking with this baby and you know this baby's there, but I wasn't trying to capture it in the same way, I guess I noticed. And it just shows how your grief journey changes. And then, so we had our boy and then we quickly, 16 months later, had our girl, Maylee. And this is it. Like we went from thinking we were going to lose, so trying earlier, and then we didn't. And so with her, I wrote, but I didn't write as much just because life was chaos too. And then we had a surprise pregnancy after Maylee, and again, this time we weren't trying. It's unbelievable when you say it out loud because just all we ever wanted was to be pregnant and have a baby. And we didn't believe we would ever have like a living baby. And then now we've got so many babies. Like it sounds bad to say, right? But we did lose that baby. And then I started writing again. So it brought that all kind of back. And I wonder if it like re-signaled something in my brain, right? Just like bringing me to that headspace again of that connectedness that I always felt and couldn't explain really. So then I started little things, right? Noticing every butterfly and that meant something to me. So we ended up, so we knew we wanted, after losing that baby, maybe not so quickly after, but we did want another baby or it sparked that in us. And then we did actually have another terminal diagnosis with our son, Jude. So he was born at 21 weeks. And that was really the spark that ignited. And it was like undeniable. I kept seeing signs everywhere. And, you start to think you're going crazy and that you're just seeing what you want to believe in. And regardless, I always tell everyone, if it brings you comfort and meaning, that's all that matters. Even if it's, I really do believe in that. But I kind of started writing and like for my own healing. But then I kind of was like, I've got 6 baby books or journals starting under my bed. What's the purpose of it all, sort of? And so I thought, let's just put them all into one document and save it just for family and friends if they're interested one day to read our story, just to understand it a little better, because there's the stuff you say outwards, but then there's the stuff that your soul says through writing, I really think. And this true meat and potatoes that are there just has the chance to express itself and come out. And it's not always pretty, right? But it was kind of, whatever that was that I just wanted to have that to offer people just to honor my babies, right? I think it just became such a tribute for me to just want to really honor their names and their souls. And then kind of what transpired from there was I was writing this book while I was pregnant with our rainbow baby, Ada, who was due a year to the day that we had just delivered our son, Jude. And it just felt so, and I hate to say that, but just like it felt complete. It just felt like that was the reason, even though I always tell people there's no reason, like these things shouldn't happen. But I couldn't stop seeing the signs, and I can really get into that. But basically it was in almost going backwards through all my journal entries. You don't see the growth that happens along the way. And again, I don't like saying like, you have to go through this to grow, like, but it did prove that to me in it's own way. And it was really interesting too, and kind of embarrassing, like the stuff that your 25-year-old self, it's your natural maturity, right? Even just in how my writing was. But talking about peed up sheets versus it's just so funny looking back. But I needed to look back to kind of go forward. And I noticed how it changed, like the grief cycle, how sometimes I would write 2 entries in one day, and some days a week would pass, and some days a month would pass. And it was really interesting. And even things like dates that I wrote, and then those same dates would end up meaning something later, but I wouldn't have known that then. And I connected those dots, and it was real, like, at the end of the day, it was just it was my own therapy almost to revisit those notes, and it forced me to do that. And so what I like to say is, so our journey kind of started in 2015, and I can applaud you, Sharna, too. Like there is a movement happening. I really do feel it, and it gives me so much hope and pride, and why I'm kind of opening up more now. But it didn't exist in 2015, or at least it was hard to find. And so I'm not going to lie. The first book I picked up and it was like a guidebook on what to do when your baby dies. I think that was the title. And it was so just like awful. But I bought the book, and it was like, as much as it was a guidebook, like step by step, like buy clothes, take picture, but it was so textbooky.
Mm.
And I felt so like I did the thing. I bought the book, I read the instructions, but it was like, but this doesn't encompass any of the grief or the emotions or the up downs. So by accident, and I see it sort of this way now, I don't tell anyone that my book's a guidebook, because I don't think there is any right way to do pregnancy loss. Like, you have to do what's right for you. And that will just happen how it's supposed to, I think. But with my book, it does show how, like, 1 minute I'm rolling around in the grass, and 1 minute I'm falling to the floor in the kitchen. And again, I had to go back to see that, because you forget. If I hadn't wrote it along the way, and it's not to say that you forget, but I think the grief is so, like, you're in a state of shock that there's so much that your body protectively pushes out. And then it's not until you go back to say, wow, these things were said to me, or there was actually support here, but it didn't feel that way. And it's so interesting and important. And I think that's what I hope my book is to someone, is just to show, like, there's no right way to do it, but this is, like, because of the chronologicalness by accident of diary entries, I could piece it and string it together in a way that it was like, this is what a day-to-day, month-to-month, year-to-year cycle of grief looks like. And it's never gone. And that's a hard thing to swallow, because I think so many do it mostly to ourselves. Like, okay, we should be over this now, or we'll get over it. And obviously we don't. And it just with every new loss and a live baby, it sparked something different each time. And then I pulled a different connection. So yeah, it kind of became my own therapy, but I'm hoping that it resonates, or at least as a companion for other women and men, just to see, like, they're not alone. Like this, like, you can be throwing a shoe the next day, and I only say this because I wrote it in the book, but like, I bit my husband. Like, I have regrets that I put that in there, but it's out. So I can, but it's funny, but it's also terrifying in the sense that I didn't know then that was delayed grief. So it's those things that you pick apart, and then it all makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But I had to, like, but if I hadn't wrote it, obviously I very much would have purposely forgot that, because it's not a fine moment.
Your husband, on the other hand, yeah.
Yeah, the marks.
He might have remembered.
So yeah, it's just the signs at the end of the day are what really pushed me forward. In writing it, I connected to it even more, and maybe even seen it even more, because I was just more aware, and it would be things that are unexplainable to other people. So I'm like, if it's unexplainable, let's just take it as it is. And it would be, helium balloons as hearts showing up, a woman on the beach with heart sea glass that she decided to give me. And like these random things where you're like, that is my baby's sending. It has to be. And it would always come at those times when you just, right, when all hope was gone or when you really needed it. And it's not to say that sometimes there's signs and then they actually meant nothing when you look back, but at the time it meant something. And if that brought you that peace, then that's everything, right?
Yeah.
So it's really, and I don't want to give it all away, but that's what I noticed too, is there was themes. My book cover is balloons. So balloons is one of them, but they just kept happening. And I'm like, you know what? It has to be because it's, or, beautiful coincidences that was just nice. But yeah, so and I've been following, that's something that is always there for every lost mom. I think you have that, regardless, you have the connection, but those signs are just those angel droppings and proof why we feel this such strong, like you said, spark, whatever that is. It's like, where does that come from? And I really do think, again, another terrible word, but the gifts that our babies give us. And I've seen it. So I'm on the other side of our journey. It's such a tricky thing to talk about because everyone's in different parts, right? So I can easily say, here we are with our 3 babies. It's been a long process to get there, but we did get there. And I recognize that's not, the case for everyone, but I do just like to speak to those things that come up. Just trust them as best as you can, even though and then on the same flip side of that, throw your shoe at a door and also trust that rage, whatever comes up, just that's what you need to feel and that's what you need to do. And I have no answers, but that's what my writing proved, I guess, to me. So, yeah.
One in 4 pregnancies will result in miscarriage. 1 in 8 women will experience infertility. 1 in 100 women will experience recurrent miscarriage. And 1 in 160 births end in stillbirth. Have you been wanting to make a difference in the lives of women or men who have experienced pregnancy loss because you can see so many suffering in silence, but you just don't know how? Collectively, we can change how bereaved parents can access mental, physical, and emotional support after their experience. There is a lot of women with unhealed trauma, and there is a huge gap in the current support system when it comes to bereaved parents' recovery after loss. There are too many women and men suffering in silence. The Pregnancy Loss Practitioner certification is a worldwide, one-of-a-kind program that gives you proven methods designed for healthcare professionals, medical staff, midwives, nurses, doulas, birth workers, coaches, and angel parents alike. The Pregnancy Loss Practitioner certification is bridging that gap. It will give you a proven support structure to follow and education specific to pregnancy loss, created by a lost mum. It is creating more education specifically for loss so that you can enhance your service and become the point of difference. Or you can create the support that you so desperately needed in your healing after loss. This is the next level of growth and expansion you have been searching for. So does this sound like something that you have been searching for? Let's explore this more together. You can head to the episode show notes where you'll find the program application, or direct message me on Instagram and let's open up the conversation in how you can use this education. You have a gift, and I look forward to supporting you and witnessing you bring your gift to the world, healing and transforming women's lives.
Yeah, it all sounds so beautiful. I honestly love the fact that you documented the really crappy days as well as the good ones, because like you said, it's not like one day you are throwing a shoe at the door, one day you are biting your husband and you're in this place of I don't know what to do with myself. I feel hopeless and helpless and lost and just heavy with all these emotions. And you're like, I don't know what to do. And then the next day, it is completely different. You wake up that day and it's different. You're not heavy. You're feeling you want to be happy, like you want to be doing things that, make you feel good. And that's what grief is. It's not to say that because you're grieving, you have to be sad. You have to be angry. You have to be frustrated. You have to be all of these like uncomfortable emotions. Grief also allows you to experience like happiness and joy and in amongst all of that. And then you just find a way for all of those to coexist together. They all take up a place within you. And I love that you documented, like you said, you bought this book that seemed so cold and rigid and like a textbook. You're like, day one or step one, do this. Step two, do this. Step three, do this. I'm like, well, it's not necessarily like that, but I guess in a way it could give you some like, okay, take the thought out of it. Someone's kind of telling me what I should be doing. But like you said, there's all this grief, all this emotion, all of this unknown and gray area. You're like, how do I navigate that? And writing and journaling can be very cathartic. It can be very therapeutic and allowing you, like you mentioned too, is having that awareness. Because we can often just go through our day thinking, oh, that was another lost day. That was another failure. That was another, write off. But if you're actually documenting or journaling and going through those things, you can see that not every day is the same. Not every day is a write off. Not every day is a failure. And then you get to the point where for you had gone through multiple diaries and then you could read back over it and see the growth that you had over that period of time. And it's not to say like if you are journaling and you don't want to read over it, you don't have to, but to see that growth and to recognize that for yourself is like, it's incredible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it was funny as I read back, it's the things that, so I noticed how at the end of certain entries, so I'd have these terrible ones where it's like, I just want to crumble in my bed and the world to disappear or whatever. But then there would be these, I almost got annoyed at myself and I called it like negative positive gratitude syndrome, where I don't know what that is. Maybe we'll patent it later, but
yeah,
where every entry ended on for a while, like on this positive note. And I noticed it more so after having kids, interestingly. And I think that's exactly as you said it. Like I was so grateful to finally have these babies, but I'm also a new mom navigating motherhood. And how dare I be ungrateful or upset when kids do the things that kids do, like throwing carrots on the ceiling. And so I was so overstimulated. And again, it wasn't till I looked back, but I didn't give myself the same grace as just non-lost moms because they could complain about their kids, but who was I to complain because I finally had everything I ever wanted. And again, looking back, I'm like, it's something I did to myself, but it did show me I was constantly in this, like, be so grateful because, you shouldn't be upset. And then I looked back and I thought, the positive flips were almost to also convince myself, like I had to remember I was writing it to help me. So me writing that positive end was like, to like try to convince myself everything's good, everything's fine. But then when I would read it back, I'm like, this is so annoying. Like, not everything's good, everything's fine. Like, so I wondered that when people read the book, I'm like, it sounds so positive and uplifting, but it's because I was so pissed off and I just need to convince myself I was fine, right? So it's interesting what we do, but that was a big one. And I kind of talk about it in like pregnancy after loss category, just because it surprised me, like how you like being pregnant and having those babies was a distraction from my previous loss that I hadn't almost, because then after that, it happened so quick that it was almost a way that I could distract. Like, I don't think I ever really processed those losses. Like I would almost keep getting pregnant to then that was my new hope to hold on to. I remember saying that to one of the doctors once, like, it sounds so back ass words, but that I needed to, that was kind of what kept me going, was that new pregnancy, even though it didn't mean getting over my other one. And then something my counselor said that was really helpful. And this came out of, because we're in it now, out of me biting my husband. That was like the climax, I think, of the book. But she said to me, she said, your body went through a trauma. And also, like, in itself, like in the losses, but then in just birthing a baby and all that comes with that, and the muscle memory, and, you know, your body remembers. And she said, so you were using gratitude, which is true. Because I was like, my mind was convincing my body I was fine. So I'm like, everything's fine because I have my baby and all of that other stuff. So my mind was like disconnected from my body. And then suddenly my body took over, because it was, your body takes longer to heal. And suddenly, that's what she said. She's like, your body was like, no, like, I experienced a trauma and just this rage, and like, it just came, well, it's easy for me, so I'll just blame it on that, but it came from somewhere else, right? But that was a big one that I like to talk about now, because it scared me, but it also just shows you like how much we go through and how much we hold on to, and we don't even really know until, unfortunately, like, something big has to happen that releases it, because we are, and you're just distracted and busy in your own ways. But yeah, it just needed to come to the surface, and me convincing myself otherwise, that I'm like, no, I'm fine. I have my kids. Like, everything's gone now, right? But that wasn't the case. Of course it wasn't. Yeah.
Yeah, our body's so intricately connected, and, you know, for you to be aware that it is trauma, because it is trauma. Not every woman is obviously going to experience it to the same degrees. Like, obviously there's going to be because every person is so different, the way that we're all composed, but it's trauma to our body. And our mind is very, very good at telling ourselves we are okay, and trying to kind of, you know, smooth over everything and saying, you know, it's fine. I have all of this stuff that I can be grateful for. But to your body, it's a completely different story. And until we can get, like you said, you were disconnected, until we can get our mind and our body on the same level, on the same page, your mind never really knows what's going on in your body. Like, because your body's like, well, I'm not going to tell that to my mind, because my mind keeps telling me I'm okay.
Yeah,
but I'm not okay. And then you do, what happened with you had this almost like this overwhelming, like, urge to do. Your body was like this, I need you to pay attention to me. And that was its way of doing it. Sometimes it is like physical things, like, you know, getting, you know, back pain or constant headaches. Like, there's physical signs of trauma in your body as well, that it's going to do something for you to go, hey, come over and listen to me, because I need you to. There's something going on here that I need you to pay attention to. And I think that's, like you said too, we can become very good at sort of disconnecting and telling the world we're okay. But our body is actually taking that. It needs more time to heal. It needs more acknowledgement. It needs more processing. And we often don't give our body any credit or any attention, because we're in our heads. We live in our heads. We keep saying, oh yeah, we're fine. It's okay. And I want to touch on too, because you were saying, like, with the whole gratitude and complaining in pregnancy after loss, because I felt the exact same thing. There must have been something that happened, like, on the day that I was complaining to myself, and I caught myself. I was saying to myself, no, I can't complain because I have my rainbow. I can't complain because I have what I've always wanted. And I stopped myself from it was almost like I self-sabotaged my happiness, because I was like, I can't be happy because I have my rainbow.
Right.
And you know, I can't be grateful for that. And, you know, when you were saying that too, I was like, I felt the exact same thing. I also stopped that thought process because it was like, I'm allowed to be happy. I'm allowed to have a baby earthside and be grateful for her being here because I know what it's like to have everything taken away. And, you know, I'm allowed to be happy.
Yes.
But we're so good as well at capping ourselves, at self-sabotaging that when we have gone through these big challenges, these big traumas.
Yeah. And good for you for recognizing that and stopping yourself, because it wasn't till way later in the journey that, like, you hear it all the time, but yeah, two truths can exist at the same time. And that really hit me, that because I'm like, that's it. Because like, how am I so grateful, but so heartbroken all the time? Like,
Yeah.
and another thing too was it actually took me until our last baby, so Ada, where I finally got anxiety meds. And that was a big, like, for the same reason where it's like, how can I possibly, like, I should be so, exactly, like, I'm pregnant again. And here we are. And like, what anyone would give to have this. And, but I was again demolishing or whatever, what we had just been through, because it was almost like, because we're here now, all that other stuff doesn't matter. So when my counselor, sometimes I think when you've got those grief blinders on, that she had to physically write it out and say it to me. She repeated like basically my history to me, even though I can do that too. But we downplay it. And she's like, Carmen, anybody else would be on anxiety meds, basically. Like, she's like, given your history. But I was in such, like, you just disconnect that. Like, and it was what I needed. And it was like, again, but it took somebody else telling me that, because we tell ourselves constantly something different. So yeah, that was a big turning point for me, and what got me through that pregnancy. I have to say it, and that's what I was almost in denial to admit, because it was like, how can I be struggling this much with what we want so bad? But it was because I had residual grief from the previous loss. Of course, like, I was going through my body was going through all the same things. And you go through, as so many grief moms know too, like, just those milestones. And then it brings back that ultrasound room. And so every time there was, and again, I wasn't admitting that to myself, but I'm like, here it is again. And that's what I like about, or just even the grief cycle in general. Like, we are using the topic of pregnancy loss, but I think that's kind of, it's just grief in general. Like, I think that just shows there's always, whether it's cancer returning, there's that trigger, like that pain in your body, that, like, it's the same and it's different, of course, but I just mean that those triggers and the ups and downs, and like, it speaks to all of us, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. And they're always there. Just as grief, it's always there. We learn how to hold space for it in our body, and we learn how to live with it in being there. And it is like, just what happens is the really intense grief days just get less and less. And so the time between is longer, and we can have more enjoyable moments in those days, months, days, weeks, months, years in between as well. But like you said, there's definitely those milestones. And to sometimes, because our body remembers, we don't necessarily, we may not mentally go, oh, well, that's grief. But you might be feeling really low and emotional and just heavy, and you don't want to get out of bed, and you're just like, well, I don't know what's happening. Yeah. And you might notice something. You might notice whether it was that you had been triggered, but without consciously being aware of it, or a date, or, a milestone, or there was something that has triggered that grief again in your body. And it could be years. Like, it doesn't have to be, that it's the immediate grief and then it's gone. It's just that, like you said, I don't even like to think of it as like a timeline, like it's a cycle. It's just something that keeps coming and going and coming and going and coming and going. And we just learn how to integrate it into our body. And I love how you said two truths can exist at the same time, because it is that is like the most truest thing. Because two truths, like you said, you can have the pain and the grief and the loss, and you can have gratitude and happiness. And those two truths can be like legitimate to you, and that's okay. And they can both be there. Yeah. And I love everything that I love how you've been able to document so much of your journey, because, you know, to be able to you've created such an emotional and physical awareness for yourself in your own journey as well. And then being able to publish it and then create it as something where it can support other people.
And just reiterating, like, the book was selfish when I say it that way, like, and I hope, like I said, it serves as a companion, but it really stemmed from just healing myself. But what's been so, and we know this, of course, but it was cathartic to release it, but then reminding myself that that's where we were in the snippet of our life at that time. And that's what memoirs are. This will serve as, you know, something for those 7 years at this point. But what I've really found more recently is that we're also allowed to change our mind, and that the journey continues. Of course it does. Like, every book has a conclusion, right? And as I said that, I'm like, there is no conclusion to grief. Like, when does this book ever end, you know? So I'm not planning a sequel, but I am noticing that I'm like, it's onwards. And these signs, of course, they keep coming, and the grief, like, the waves do get softer. And that's why I'm on this end of the journey, that I probably like find peace more than I did in the beginning. And you can see that just in looking back. But where, like, the book did show me how I went from being like really fearful to over grateful to having delayed grief to complete heartbreak again with a different experience, and then going through kind of the same experience again, and then parenting after loss, but then also still getting the messages from our babies. So and another thing too was that came up is like death anxiety, actually. So it's like, but that stemmed from, like, had I not gone through that, I probably wouldn't have had that, right? So that's what I mean. It's just, everyone knows that, but new things keep coming up, good, bad, right? It's just living life. But I think, and I'll just say it, but I do think, and on that trajectory, like good, bad, but that in general, in experiencing loss, we experience gains too. Like, I think we just feel everything deeper is always what I say to people. So, like, that's why I don't want to say better or worse, but like, we have these intense emotional, like, just breakdowns, and just, you're broken, and, you know, and so sad. But then we also have these like elated moments, and I think we just feel more. So it's like, that's what I mean. I'm like, it's not always great, but I've definitely noticed that I'm like, you just feel more, and that can be beautiful. But it's what you do with that, I think, and just always, you know, taking care of yourself. And I think talk therapy and what we're doing, like all of that, just to normalize and not feel so alone, and that our emotions, our feelings are valid and don't need to be locked up like in pages of diaries. So until, right, but they needed to be, they did need to be for a while, and then yeah, no, that's kind of I think that's a good like conclusion kind of to end on.
Yeah, that sounds so beautiful. And I absolutely agree with you in feeling everything so much more intensely, like the good emotions and also the bad, but you can feel those insanely good days, and you feel them so much, more intensely and more to your core than probably you would ever do before. So that's a beautiful note to end on. Where can people connect with you or find out more about, you know, what you do and your book?
Yeah. So Instagram, always Instagram. So my handle is at a diary to our babies. And I sort of started that account after I released the book because of that reason where I said, oh, wow, like there's still more. So it's kind of like my afterword, I guess, of the book. I also, and I can just pop it in, but I even just email. I'm happy to, so I'll give that to you, Sharna, as well. And yeah, those are the main ones, but I'm happy to connect. And my book is available on Amazon. I don't know if it's hit overseas yet, but it can also be shipped from Canada. It's Demeter Press is the publishing company, but I know that the overseas costs, but maybe there's a discount or something I can look into. But yeah, it is searchable online.
Yeah. Amazing. Thank you so much. And I just want to thank you, Carmen, for being part of the What I Wish I Knew After Pregnancy Loss podcast.
It's a pleasure. And congrats, Sharna. It's great. Great what you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you to all that have listened in. If this episode was valuable to you, I invite you to leave a review on Apple Podcasts, and I look forward to supporting you on the next episode. I caught up with Carmen off the podcast and asked her what she wished she knew after pregnancy loss. And this is what she said. I wish for all of us. I think that the first time it happened that I wasn't alone or the only one it happened to. Like she mentioned in the episode, it was even more of a shock to her as she didn't believe or really know that babies died. She was so protected by this fact as a kid, and if she did know, she must have blocked it out or because it just didn't serve her and wasn't something that was ever going to happen to her. Carmen also adds, as I shared of our loss, I would have friends open up about their own mothers going through losses, which was helpful and so neat in retrospect to know that these mums of our generation had shared their babies with their daughters because they are real and mattered and are here with us for a lifetime. So this brought me comfort. I did believe, though, that I was the only one my age going through it for the longest time. And now further into our journey, as our friends start to begin their families, more and more, if my friends are opening up about it to me, now I find I'm getting the support my younger self needed in having had shared about our journey. Her book, A Diary to My Babies, Journeying Through Pregnancy Loss, was created out of mothering herself through her healing, and it has become the support she needed. Her links to the book and contacts will be placed in the show notes. Thank you for listening in with me today. I hope you found this episode helpful. If you did, I would absolutely love to hear from you. Take a screenshot of this episode, share it to social media, and tag me at Institute of Healing_PL. I love seeing what is resonating with you right now. If you want to chat further, I invite you to connect with me through Instagram. Head over and follow my Instagram account, send me a DM, and let's open the communication. If you want to know more about how you can be the support for others, head to the show notes and fill out the application form for the Pregnancy Loss Practitioner certification. I want to also note here that what I share within the episodes is not medical advice. If you need further support, please consult your doctor. Thank you again. Much love to you. Be gentle with yourself, and I look forward to supporting you on the next episode.